After driving 9 hours through a snowstorm to surprise my husband on his birthday, I walked in with a cake and found him with his sister. Then I heard them say, "God, I hope she crashes. We could use the insurance." I left the cake on the counter. The next morning, I was gone. Hello everyone. My name is Eleanor, and I need to tell you what happened. I feel like if I don't get this out, it'll stay stuck inside me forever. I need to tell someone who will understand. It's a long story, but I promise you, it's a true one. And it starts, like so many stories do, with me trying to do something nice for the man I loved. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. 7 years. That's how long Preston and I were married. We had the classic story, the kind you see in old movies. High school sweethearts who drifted apart for college and careers, only to find each other again at a mutual friend's wedding in our 30s. It felt like fate. For a long time, I thought we had it all. A comfortable little house on a street lined with maple trees, 2 reliable cars, enough money to not lay awake at night worrying about the bills. It wasn't a life of luxury, but it was ours. It was real. Or so I told myself. The cracks started to show about a year before everything fell apart. They were so small at first you could barely see them. Preston got a small promotion at the downtown investment firm where he worked. It wasn't a huge jump in his salary, but it came with a new title and, more importantly, a new set of friends. Suddenly, our quiet weekends of gardening and going to the movies were replaced by obligatory dinners with people who dripped brand names, talked about their stock portfolios, and always seemed to be planning their next trip to Cabo. He started making comments. They were like little pebbles tossed into a calm pond, and I felt the ripples long after. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, the one we'd spent weeks picking out together. He was scrolling on his phone, the blue light illuminating his face. "You know," he said, not looking up, "Mark and Jen are adding a second story to their house. Must be nice." I looked around our cozy living room, at the bookshelves I'd built myself, at the warm glow of the lamp. "Our house is lovely, Preston," I said softly. "It's a starter home, Eleanor," he sighed, as if explaining something to a child. "We're not starters anymore. Or at least, we shouldn't be." Then the comments turned to me. I worked part-time at the local library. I loved it. The peace, the smell of old paper, the joy of helping a child find a book that would open up their world. It didn't pay much, but it was my thing. To him, it became an embarrassment. "Eleanor, the salary you're bringing in, it's fine for hobbies, but it doesn't even cover the property taxes. We need to be thinking bigger picture," he'd say. Then there was his sister, Beatrice. They'd always been close, inseparable as kids, and I'd always thought it was sweet. But lately, their closeness felt exclusive. Suffocating. She'd come over for dinner and they'd speak in a kind of code, sharing inside jokes and memories that I wasn't a part of. She had this way of looking at me, a little smirk playing on her lips, like she knew a secret I didn't. When I'd try to join the conversation, she'd give me a blank stare and then turn back to Preston, effectively shutting me out. I chalked it up to a strange family dynamic. I told myself I was being insecure. I loved my husband, and you don't just throw away 7 years of history over a few strange feelings. You try harder. So, for his 40th birthday, I decided to try harder. I would do something big, something so full of love and effort that it would blast away all the weirdness and remind him of the couple we used to be. The plan came to me when he started complaining for weeks that he had to spend his birthday weekend helping Beatrice move into her new condo 3 states away. He put on a whole performance, sighing dramatically, talking about how much he'd miss a real celebration. "It's a shame, honey, but family is family," I said, patting his arm and playing my part. "She needs you. We'll celebrate properly when you get back. I'll make your favorite dinner." But that was a lie. A beautiful, hopeful lie. I had already gone to the library director and requested Friday off, citing a family matter. The plan was perfect in its simplicity. I would drive the 9 hours to Beatrice's new city on Friday. I knew from his complaining that he loved a famous bakery there called the German Oven. I would stop and pick up his absolute favorite cake, a Black Forest cherry torte, the kind with real whipped cream and dark chocolate shavings. I'd scoured the internet and found the fanciest steakhouse in town, a place called the Gilded Bull, and after a month of trying, I'd secured a reservation for 2. I even packed his favorite dress of mine, a simple blue sheath dress he always said made my eyes look brighter. I had it all pictured in my head, the look of pure shock and joy on his face when I walked through that door. I imagined him laughing, wrapping his arms around me, telling me I was crazy for driving all this way, but that he loved me for it. I was so sure this one grand gesture could fill in all the little cracks that had been forming. I was so sure it would fix us. I was a complete and utter fool. The weather reports started looking sketchy on Thursday night. I was watching the 10 o'clock news, half listening while I folded laundry, when the screen flashed a bright red banner. A winter storm warning. A big, nasty system was moving in from the west, predicting 6 to 10 inches of snow right across the entire 3-state route I needed to drive. Any sane person would have cancelled. They would have called the restaurant, unpacked their bag, and put the nice bottle of champagne back in the fridge. But I wasn't sane. I was a woman on a mission, fueled by a desperate, stubborn kind of hope. I convinced myself the meteorologists were always wrong, always exaggerating. A little snow wasn't going to stop me from saving my marriage. I left at 7 in the morning on Friday, my car packed, my heart full. The first hour was deceptively easy, just a light dusting on the highway that melted as soon as it hit the pavement. "See?" I said aloud to the empty car. "Nothing to worry about." But then the sky turned a bruised, ugly gray, and the flakes started coming down. Not the gentle, pretty kind you see on Christmas cards, but thick, wet, heavy snow that stuck to the windshield the second the wipers cleared it. The world outside my windows dissolved into a swirling vortex of white. What should have been a 6-hour drive in good weather turned into a 9-hour nightmare. Soon, I was in a slow-moving convoy of flashing hazard lights, crawling along at 20 miles an hour. My knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel so hard. I could barely see the red taillights of the semi-truck in front of me, its massive wheels kicking up a blinding spray of slush. 3 different times, the entire highway came to a dead stop because of an accident up ahead. During the first delay, I sat for nearly an hour, watching the snow pile up on my hood, the silence inside my car deafening except for the soft thump-thump of my own anxious heart. I had to stop twice at grimy roadside gas stations that smelled of diesel and despair. I wasn't low on gas, but I was low on nerve. The coffee was burnt and tasted like plastic, but it was hot, and I held the flimsy cup with both hands, trying to stop them from shaking. At the second stop, I almost gave up. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, and thought, this is insane. I should just turn back. Or get a motel room. But then I pictured Preston's face. The surprise. The smile. I imagined him wrapping his arms around me, telling me I was crazy for driving all this way, but that he loved me for it. That single, foolish thought was the fuel I ran on. Worth it, I kept telling myself, like a prayer. It'll all be worth it. I finally pulled into Beatrice's new neighborhood around 4 in the afternoon. It was one of those fancy, sterile-looking places with identical townhouses and perfectly manicured, though currently snow-covered, lawns. The plows hadn't come through the residential streets yet, so I had to park a block away. I got out of the car, my legs stiff and aching, and grabbed the beautiful cake box from the German oven off the passenger seat. The wind was biting, and I trudged through ankle-deep snow, balancing the box carefully in my arms. By the time I reached her front door, number 42B, my jeans were soaked and freezing, my toes were numb, and I was bone-tired. But I had made it. I stood there on her little welcome mat, took a deep, shuddering breath, and smiled for the first time all day. I was about to ring the bell when I noticed the door was slightly ajar. Odd, I thought, but I figured they were busy unpacking, hauling boxes in and out. So, I nudged it open with my shoulder and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the quiet. It was a heavy, loaded silence. I'd expected to hear voices, the TV, the sound of boxes being torn open. But there was nothing. Just the faint, almost imperceptible hum of a refrigerator and the ticking of a clock somewhere. The air was warm and still. "Preston?" I called out softly, my voice sounding small in the entryway. "B? It's me." No answer. I kicked off my snowy boots, my feet tingling as the feeling returned, and set the precious cake box down on a small end table. The living room was a chaotic landscape of half-unpacked boxes, stacks of bubble wrap, and furniture draped in plastic sheets. It looked like no one had made any progress in hours. The silence was starting to feel wrong, deeply unsettling. I walked through the living room and headed down the short hallway toward what I guessed were the bedrooms. Maybe they were taking a nap after a long day of moving. That's when I heard it. A sound. Not talking. It was a low, rhythmic sound coming from the guest bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was mostly closed, but not fully latched. My heart started to beat a little faster, a nervous flutter in my chest. Was he sick? Had he fallen and hurt himself? I crept closer, my socked feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. The sounds got clearer as I approached. It was a soft moan, then a sharp, feminine giggle. A man's voice, Preston's voice, murmuring something low and urgent that I couldn't make out. My blood ran cold. I stopped dead in the hallway, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it. It's the TV, I told myself. They're just watching a movie in bed. It was the only explanation that didn't make me want to throw up. But I had to know. I had to be sure. I put my hand on the cool brass doorknob, my fingers trembling so hard I could barely grip it. I held my breath and pushed the door open just a crack, just enough to peer inside. And my world ended. It wasn't the TV. They were on the bed, on top of the covers. A tangle of limbs. A sight so wrong, so profoundly unnatural that my brain refused to process it for a solid second. It was like looking at a broken picture. My husband. And his sister. I saw his face, buried in her neck. I saw her hand tangled in his hair. I saw enough to last a lifetime. I snatched my hand back from the door like I'd touched a hot stove. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a cry, a gasp, any sound that would betray my presence. I didn't make a sound. I couldn't. I was frozen, pinned to the spot by a level of shock and disgust I didn't know was possible. I felt the burnt gas station coffee rise in my throat, and I swallowed it back down, the acidic taste filling my mouth. My first instinct was to run. Just turn and bolt and never look back. But my feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. And then, through the buzzing haze of my horror, I heard their voices clearly. They were speaking now, their tones casual, relaxed. "You have to be more careful, Preston," Beatrice said, her voice breathy and smug. What if she'd called? What if she'd decided to drive up anyway? "She won't," Preston laughed. It was a low, ugly, confident sound I had never heard before. "She thinks I'm miserable here, being the good little husband helping my sissy move. She bought the whole act. She has no idea." "Still," Beatrice said, and I could hear the rustle of sheets. "With that life insurance policy, we have to be patient. We can't afford any mistakes. Mom and Dad would be furious if we mess this up before we get that inheritance." My breath caught in my throat, a painful, silent sob. Life insurance? Inheritance? Then came the words that will be burned into my memory until the day I die. It was Preston's voice, calm and detached, as if he were discussing a business deal. "God, I hope she crashes on the way home tomorrow. The roads will still be a mess. We could really use the insurance money. It would solve everything." Beatrice giggled again, a high, sharp sound like breaking glass. "Or at least a few months of silence." Can you imagine the peace? We could get the ball rolling on selling the house. No more dealing with her penny pinching. Mom and Dad would be so proud of you, finally taking charge. They laughed together. Actual, genuine laughter. At the thought of my death. At the thought of my funeral, a celebration that would make them rich. Something inside me snapped. The shock, the hurt, the disgust, it all evaporated, replaced by a cold, clear void. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing at all. I was on autopilot, a machine executing a program. I turned around, my movements stiff and robotic, and walked silently back to the entryway. I picked up the beautiful cake box. I walked into the kitchen, which I could now see was spotless and completely unpacked, and I placed the box squarely in the middle of the clean, granite counter. I didn't slam it. I set it down gently, perfectly centered. Then I turned, walked back out the front door, closing it softly behind me so it clicked shut. And I walked back into the blizzard, leaving my 7-year marriage behind me, sitting on a countertop in a white cardboard box. I don't remember the walk back to my car. I don't remember trudging through the snow, my mind a complete and utter blank. The next thing I knew, I was sitting in the driver's seat, staring through the windshield at the relentless, swirling snow. The engine was off. My hands were on the wheel, but I couldn't feel them. The whole world had gone quiet, muffled by the snow and the roaring in my own ears. I must have sat there for a long time. 20 minutes. Maybe an hour. Time had stopped making sense. Then, a sharp buzzing sound from my coat pocket jolted me back to reality. I pulled out my phone. A text from Preston. "Hey honey. Just checking in. Must be getting ready for bed. Drive safe tomorrow. Love you." I stared at the words "love you" until they blurred and warped into something monstrous. I almost threw the phone out the window. Instead, I just dropped it onto the passenger seat as if it were contaminated. Then it started ringing, his name and picture, a smiling photo of us on a beach, flashing on the screen. The sound was violent, an intrusion into my silent, shattered world. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. It rang again immediately. And again. And again. I finally managed to put the key in the ignition. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove away from that neighborhood of identical houses, away from that house of horrors. I found the nearest motel, a dingy-looking place called the Sleepy Hollow Inn with a flickering neon sign where the S was burnt out. I paid $80 in cash to a tired-looking man behind a plexiglass barrier. He slid a key attached to a large plastic fob toward me. Room 107. The room smelled of stale cigarettes, bleach, and desperation. The carpet was a tapestry of mysterious stains, and the wallpaper was peeling near the window unit. The first thing I did was walk into the bathroom, with its buzzing fluorescent light and cracked linoleum floor, and vomit until there was nothing left but dry, painful heaves. I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed and finally looked at my phone. 17 missed calls. 38 text messages. I didn't read a single one. I powered the phone off completely. The silence was a relief. I lay down on top of the scratchy, synthetic bedspread, still in my damp, freezing clothes, and stared at the water-stained ceiling tiles. I tried to make sense of it all, but my brain refused. It was like trying to assemble a puzzle where none of the pieces fit. Husband. Sister. Insurance. Funeral. The words just tumbled around in the void. I didn't cry. I was far beyond tears. I just lay there, hollowed out, until the gray morning light filtered through the thin, grimy curtains. When I woke, my body ached as if I'd been in a car crash, but my mind was terrifyingly clear. The numbness had worn off, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I knew I couldn't go back. Not ever. The woman who had driven 9 hours to save her marriage was dead. A different woman had woken up in her place. I turned my phone back on. A deluge of notifications. 63 texts. 29 missed calls. I ignored them all and opened a new message. My fingers were steady as I typed. It was to my best friend, Cassandra. Cassie. We've known each other since kindergarten. She's the kind of friend you can call at 3 a.m. from a jail cell in another country, and her first question would be, "What's the bail?" My text was simple: "Cassie, something terrible happened with Preston. I need a place to crash for a few days. I'm on my way back." Her reply came less than a minute later. "The spare room is always ready. The door's unlocked. Drive safe, Elle. I'll put the kettle on." I cried then. Hot, silent tears rolled down my cheeks. Not for my broken marriage, but for the simple, unshakable kindness of a true friend. It was a pinprick of light in an otherwise total darkness. I drove the 9 hours back home in a silent daze. When I finally pulled onto my street, Maple Street, I saw that Preston's car wasn't in the driveway. He was still at Beatrice's, probably just waking up, still playing the role of the devoted brother. I walked through my front door, and it felt like walking into a stranger's home. The photos on the wall of us smiling on vacation, at our wedding, they looked like pictures of two actors in a play, and I just found out the play was a tragedy. I went upstairs and methodically packed 3 large suitcases. I took only what was undeniably mine. My clothes. My toiletries. My grandmother's jewelry. I went into our home office and found our fireproof box. I took my passport, my birth certificate, and our marriage certificate. I don't know why I took that one. Maybe as evidence. A reminder of the lie I had been living. Then I walked out, leaving my house key on the kitchen counter, right next to a pile of mail I knew I would never open. And I drove to Cassie's, leaving my old life behind me. The first 3 days at Cassie's are a blur of exhaustion and tea. I slept on the pull-out couch in her spare room, a cozy little space filled with half-finished paintings and stacks of art supplies that she calls her craft room. She didn't push me to talk. She just created a safe, quiet space for me to fall apart in. She'd bring me mugs of chamomile tea and plates of toast I barely touched. She sat with me while I stared blankly at the TV, not even registering what was on. And she became the gatekeeper for my phone, which was buzzing and ringing with a frantic, incessant energy. "It's Preston again," she'd say quietly, her voice laced with contempt as she silenced another call. And again. "Now it's Beatrice, the little witch." And now, oh, fantastic. It's his mother, the queen bee herself. On the 3rd day, I finally felt strong enough to face the onslaught. I needed to see what he was saying. I needed to understand the shape of the lie he was building. Cassie sat next to me on the couch, a protective arm around my shoulders, as I opened my messages. It was like watching a masterclass in psychological manipulation. First came the performance of the worried husband. "Eleanor, where are you?" "I'm worried sick. I came home and you were gone. Your key is on the counter. You just disappeared. Please, honey, just let me know you're okay." When that got no response, it shifted to wounded defensiveness, as if he suspected I might have heard something. "If you're mad about something I said to be, you're taking it the wrong way. You weren't supposed to hear that. We were just joking around. You know how our family has a dark sense of humor. It was just words." When that failed, the anger and condescension emerged. "This is ridiculous, Eleanor. You're being childish and completely irrational. Whatever's going on in your head, you need to snap out of it. Answer your damn phone and stop acting like a child." And finally, the classic gaslighting and guilt-tripping finale. "I can't believe you're doing this to me. I'm so stressed out. My own wife is ghosting me. All our friends are asking what's going on, and I don't know what to tell them. They think you're having some kind of breakdown. And the part that made my blood run cold, if you don't call me back, I'm going to report you missing to the police. I'll have no choice. He was threatening to use the authorities to drag me back, to paint me as the crazy one. Not one message said, "I'm sorry." Not one message acknowledged the real, monstrous thing he had done with his sister, let alone the murder plot. It was all about him. His worry. His stress. His reputation. "He's not just a cheater, Elle," Cassie said, her voice tight with a rage that matched my own. "He's a classic narcissist. He's already controlling the narrative, painting you as the unstable one before you even get a chance to speak." She was right. The proof came later that day. A mutual friend, Sarah, a woman I'd always liked, sent me a tentative text. "Hey Elle, hope you're okay. Preston is really worried. He called me, said you guys had a misunderstanding after he got home and you just took off. He thinks you're overreacting a bit. I know he can be a handful, but I'm sure you two can work it out." The rage that filled me was so hot and pure it was clarifying. He was already poisoning the well, turning my own friends against me with his carefully crafted lies. I showed the text to Cassie. "This is what he does," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "He makes me the problem. He always has." That was the moment I stopped being a victim and started making a plan. Cassie, being the incredible, practical friend she is, already had her laptop open on the coffee table. "Okay," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "First things first. Money. He will use it to control you. You need your own account, and you need to secure your half of what's yours. And second, you need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A shark." That afternoon, while Preston was busy playing the part of the worried, long-suffering husband to our friends, I was taking action. Cassie drove me to my bank. I sat down with the branch manager, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable. I didn't tell her the whole sordid story, just that I was in a volatile domestic dispute and needed to secure my finances immediately. She understood completely. She helped me open a new checking and savings account in my name only. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings into my new account. Not a penny more. Then I called the credit card companies and reported our joint cards lost, requesting a new one in my name only, sent to Cassie's address. That evening, Cassie put me in touch with a friend of her older sister's, a divorce lawyer named Margaret O'Connell. Her nickname in the legal community, Cassie told me, was Maggie the Mauler. I spent an hour on the phone with her, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger as I laid out the entire story, from the coldness at home to the scene in the bedroom to the insurance plot to the gaslighting texts. Margaret was quiet for a long moment when I finished. Then she said, in a calm, steady voice that instantly reassured me, "Eleanor, I am so profoundly sorry this has happened to you. But I want you to listen to me. From a legal standpoint, you are in a very strong position. The first thing we need to do is protect you. The second is to make sure he doesn't get away with a single thing." By the end of the day, I had a new bank account, frozen credit cards, a top-tier lawyer on retainer, and a clear path forward. Preston thought I was hiding in a corner, crying my eyes out. He had no idea I was in a war room, building an army. A week after I left, I knew I had to go back to the house one more time. It was a tactical mission. I needed my remaining personal documents, some sentimental items I'd forgotten, and most importantly, I needed to survey the scene. Preston was at work, I knew his schedule by heart, so I had a clear 5-hour window. Cassie insisted on coming with me, driving her big, slightly beat-up SUV. "Moral support," she said, squeezing my hand as we pulled onto Maple Street. "And muscle. We're getting your stuff, and we're getting it fast." Walking back into that house was one of the strangest experiences of my life. A week ago, it was my home, my sanctuary. Now, it felt like a museum of a life that wasn't mine. It was eerily clean. Preston was clearly keeping up appearances. But it felt cold, hollow. It was a movie set. A crime scene. A place where a ghost lived. My ghost. I worked with a chilling, methodical efficiency. Cassie helped me, hauling empty boxes in from her car. I started in the bedroom. I packed all my remaining clothes, my shoes, my collection of old, soft t-shirts I slept in. But the things he had bought for me over the years, the expensive dresses he'd picked out to show me off at his work parties, the designer handbag he'd given me for Christmas, I left them hanging in the closet like empty skins. I took my grandmother's simple gold watch from the jewelry box but left the diamond earrings he gave me for our 5th anniversary sitting right on the dresser. In the living room, I went through the bookshelves. My novels, my poetry collections, my art history books, they all went into boxes. His business books and political thrillers, I left them untouched, a neat and tidy monument to his own self-importance. I took the small, weird abstract painting I'd bought at a local art fair that he always said he hated. It looks like a scrambled egg, he'd complained. I left the big, generic landscape print of a sailboat that he had chosen, the one he said was a smart investment. Everywhere I went, I systematically erased myself. My favorite blue coffee mug. My worn-out gardening gloves from the shed. The soft, worn quilt my mother had made for me that we kept on the couch. Box after box went out to Cassie's SUV. But here's the thing that felt most important. I left all the things we'd bought together. The big leather couch we spent 3 weekends arguing over. The heavy oak dining room table where we'd hosted Thanksgiving and countless dinner parties. The bed. I couldn't bring myself to touch the bed. And I left every single framed photo exactly where it was. Us in Italy, smiling like fools in front of the Colosseum. Us on a boat in Maine, squinting in the sun, my hair a mess from the wind. Me, looking up at him on our wedding day, my face full of a naive, trusting love that made my stomach physically hurt to look at now. I wanted him to come home to a house that was half empty, a house that screamed of my absence in 1,000 silent ways, but was still full of my smiling face. I wanted him to be haunted by the woman he had tried to erase. Before I walked out for the last time, I did 3 small, petty things. I'm not proud of them, not really. But in that moment, they felt like a necessary act of rebellion. First, I went to the thermostat and turned the central air conditioning down to 62 degrees. Preston hated being cold, always insisted on keeping the house at a balmy, wasteful 72. He would come home to an icebox. Second, I walked into the kitchen and unscrewed the light bulb from inside the refrigerator. It was a tiny inconvenience, something he probably wouldn't notice until he stumbled out for a glass of milk in the middle of the night. But it would irritate him. It was a small bit of darkness in his perfectly ordered world. And third, I found the Wi-Fi router in the office. I unplugged it, took a black Sharpie from the desk drawer, and wrote a new Wi-Fi password on a yellow sticky note. I stuck it right on top of the router. The new password was Incest and Insurance 2025. Then I plugged it back in. As I locked the door behind me for the last time, I felt a strange, cold sense of peace. It wasn't closure, not even close. But it was a start. It was me, taking back a tiny piece of the power he had stolen from me. Cassie gave me a sideways look, a slow smile spreading across her face as I got back in the car. "You okay?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. I looked back at the pretty little house on Maple Street, my former home. "I'm getting there," I said. And for the first time in a week, I actually believed it. The social media post was Cassie's idea. It came to her a few days later, after the mission to the house. "He's still controlling the story, Elle," she said. We were sitting on her small balcony, drinking iced tea. "He's still playing the poor, confused husband whose wife had a breakdown. You need to disrupt it. You don't have to say a word. Just a picture. A little chaos." So I did it. I scrolled through my phone to the one picture I had taken that horrible day. It was a photo of the Black Forest cake, sitting in its perfect white box on the pristine, empty counter of Beatrice's kitchen. It was an image of innocence, but for me, it was a picture of the exact moment my life shattered. I posted it to my Facebook page. No caption. No explanation. No tags. Just the cake. Within an hour, my phone, which had been relatively quiet, exploded. Friends texting, "What does this mean? Is that the cake from the German oven? I thought you were home. Ellie, what's going on? Are you okay?" And then, the calls from Preston started. 6 calls in 20 minutes. I let them all go to voicemail. The hornet's nest had been kicked. The confrontation I had been dreading and, in a strange way, anticipating, didn't happen in public. It happened at my sanctuary, Cassie's front door. It was 2 weeks to the day after I had left. I was in the kitchen, helping Cassie make dinner, when the doorbell rang. We both froze. Cassie wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to the door, peering through the peephole. Her body stiffened. "It's him," she mouthed to me, her eyes wide with alarm. "Don't answer it," I whispered, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. "Too late," she whispered back. "He's seen me." She took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and opened it just a crack, blocking the entrance with her body. "Can I help you, Preston?" she asked, her voice dripping ice. "I need to see her, Cassie," I heard him say. His voice was strained. "I know she's in there. Eleanor, please. We need to talk." I walked to the door and stood behind Cassie. "There's nothing to talk about, Preston." He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, there were dark circles under his eyes, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Good, I thought. "Please, Elle," he begged, trying to push the door open. Cassie didn't budge. "Just 5 minutes. Let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "Explain the part where I found you with your sister, or the part where you wished I would die in a car crash?" He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "It wasn't like that," he hissed, his eyes darting around the quiet suburban street. "You misunderstood. We were drinking. We were being stupid. It was a joke. A terrible, terrible joke that went too far. You weren't meant to hear it." "A joke," I repeated, my voice flat. I stepped forward, and Cassie moved aside, letting me fill the doorway. "Was it a joke when you talked about my funeral? Was it a joke when you mentioned the inheritance from your parents? Tell me, Preston, what part was the punchline?" "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising in desperation. "You're twisting things. I would never hurt you." And that's when I knew I had him. The lie was too big, too tangled. "You know, Preston," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I have a voice memo app on my phone. I was using it on the drive up to your sister's. I was making a list of other gift ideas for you, talking into it so I wouldn't forget. And in all the chaos when I arrived, I never turned it off." I saw the color drain from his face. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, a flicker of pure panic in his eyes. "That's right," I continued, pressing my advantage. "I have it all. Every word. Beatrice talking about your parents being furious if you messed up the inheritance. You wishing for my death. Her talking about how peaceful it would be. And the laughter. I have the laughter." He just stared at me, speechless. The mask of the concerned husband, the misunderstood victim, it had shattered completely. All that was left was the ugly, terrified man underneath. "You're a monster, Preston," I said, the words feeling utterly true. "You and your whole sick family. Now, get off my friend's property before I call the police and play the recording for them. The divorce papers will be served to you at your office tomorrow. Have a nice life." I slammed the door in his face. I leaned against it, my body trembling, the adrenaline finally hitting me. Cassie wrapped her arms around me. "You did it," she whispered in my ear. "You took your power back." And in that moment, shaking in the safety of my friend's hallway, I knew she was right. The confrontation was over. The war was just beginning. Slamming the door in Preston's face was a turning point. It was a declaration. The fear that had been a cold knot in my stomach for 2 weeks finally began to loosen its grip. That night, I called my lawyer, Margaret. He came to the house, I told her, my voice steady, recounting every detail of the confrontation, right down to the look of pure panic on his face when I mentioned the recording. "Good," she said, her voice sharp and focused. "He's rattled. That's when people make mistakes. We need to move, and we need to move fast. I'm filing the divorce papers first thing in the morning. And based on what you told me, his threats, his plan, and his showing up uninvited, I'm filing for a temporary restraining order. He won't be able to come near you, Cassie's home, or the library." The relief was so immense it felt like a physical weight lifting off my chest. For the first time, there would be a legal barrier between him and me. "Thank you, Margaret." "Don't thank me yet," she said, her voice grim. "This is going to get ugly. A man like that, with a family like that, they don't go down without a fight. They will try to destroy your credibility. Be prepared." She was right. 2 days after a courier served Preston with the divorce papers and the restraining order right in the middle of his glass-walled office, a detail Margaret made sure to arrange and which I admit I savored, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but some instinct told me I should. It was his mother, Mrs. Sterling. "Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with a false, syrupy sweetness that made my teeth ache. "I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. My poor son is beside himself. This is all just a silly fight that's gotten out of hand." "No, Mrs. Sterling," I said, my voice as calm and cold as a frozen lake. "There has been no misunderstanding. I know exactly what I saw and what I heard." Her tone changed instantly, the sweetness vanishing, replaced by pure venom. "You are tearing this family apart over a childish fantasy you've cooked up in your head," she hissed. "Preston and Beatrice have always been exceptionally close. You are a jealous, vindictive woman who can't stand that he has a family that loves him. If you know what's good for you, you will drop this ridiculous lawsuit and stop trying to ruin my son's life and his chance at a promotion." The mention of the promotion made it all click. They weren't just protecting their son, they were protecting their investment. Ruin his life? I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. "Ma'am, with all due respect, your son is sleeping with your daughter, and together they plan to have me killed for an inheritance that you apparently knew all about. The only life that's been ruined here is mine. And I promise you, I am just getting started rebuilding it. You and your family can stay out of it, or you can explain your exceptionally close children to a judge. Your choice." I hung up before she could respond, my hand shaking with rage. The conversation was chilling. She hadn't denied it. Not the incest, not the plot. She had confirmed everything. She was complicit. They were all in it together. This wasn't just my husband, it was his entire, twisted, rotten family. But then, just as I was sinking into a pit of despair, thinking the whole world was against me, something unexpected happened. A lifeline from an unlikely source. An old college friend of Preston's, a man named Mark who I had always liked, sent me a message on Facebook. "Eleanor, I don't know the details of what's going on, but I heard through the grapevine that you and Preston have separated. I'm not taking sides, but I feel like I have to say something. I stopped hanging out with Preston a few years ago because of Beatrice. There was always something about their relationship that made my skin crawl. He'd cancel plans with me and the guys if she called. He talked about her constantly. It was weird. I never said anything, and I feel like a coward for it now. If you need someone to attest to his character or their unusual closeness, I'm here. Just say the word. I sat there, staring at the message on my phone screen, and tears welled in my eyes. It was the first piece of external validation I had received. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. Someone else had seen it too. It was a small crack of light in the darkness, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. And just like that, the battle lines were drawn. It was me, Cassie, and a lawyer named Maggie the Mauler against the entire Sterling clan. And for the first time, I thought, maybe, just maybe, we had a fighting chance.